Today we're going to talk about biased and unbiased survey questions, and then we're going to make up some survey questions as well. So the questions chosen for a survey or procedures used in an experiment can also introduce bias and thus affect the results of the study. Okay, so you want these questions to be unbiased so it doesn't affect the results. So a survey question that is poorly written may result in a response that does not accurately reflect the opinion of the participant. Therefore, it is important to write questions that are clear and precise, and avoid survey questions that are confusing or wordy, cause a strong reaction, encourage a certain response, or address more than one issue. Questions can also introduce bias if there is not enough information given for the participant to give an accurate response. So in this example here, we want to determine whether each survey question is biased or unbiased. If it is biased, we want to explain why it is. So in letter A, that question says, how many glasses of water do you drink a day? Would that be biased or unbiased? It's unbiased. Okay, so it doesn't lean towards one opinion over another.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't.
People
Letter B, that question says, do you prefer watching exciting action movies or boring documentaries?
That's not.
That one is biased.
You have Isaiah now?
But only.
I don't have Isaiah now.
What did I see this? Okay. Sorry.
So it is biased. So if you look at these adjectives here, for action movies, it says exciting. For documentaries, it says boring. Okay, so I would say the adjectives exciting, and boring suggest that the respondent should agree,
We have to break that.
yep, that action movies are preferable to documentaries. So for this one, we did want to write out why, because in our directions, it said, if biased, explain your reasoning. So we do have to write out why we thought it was biased. And it had to do with those adjectives. So if you were to take those out, that would become an unbiased question. So if you said, do you prefer watching action movies or documentaries? That would be an unbiased question then. Questions on those two? Bias, unbiased. So when designing a survey, clearly state the objective, identify the population, and carefully choose unbiased survey questions. So we're actually going to kind of design a survey here. So first is to state that objective, then suggest the population we're going to survey, and then we're going to come up with two unbiased survey questions. So example 4 says that Jim decides to conduct a survey to determine how many teachers from his school with at least 5 years of experience would be interested in teaching an online course. So what is the objective of this survey? What's the end part say?
Online.
Online course. So our objective is to determine a teacher's interest in teaching an online course. Okay, our next part of designing this survey is to suggest the population to survey. So who would you have to survey in order to figure this out?
Teachers over 5 years.
Okay, so teachers at the school with 5 years experience. Okay, the last part, we just want to write 2 unbiased survey questions for those teachers. Okay, so 1 could just be, how long have you been teaching? Okay, because you're surveying teachers that are 5 years or more, so you could see somebody with 20 years experience or somebody with 5. So you want to ask that question first. So, how long? How long have you been teaching? I want the second question now to be more about what our objective is.
Would you teach an online class?
So, would you teach an online class? Okay, it doesn't make you lean towards teaching it or not teaching it. So those kind of make sense, finding the objective, stating the population you want to survey, and then just coming up with those 2 questions that pertain to the objective. Okay. Then on the back here. So to avoid introducing bias in experiments, the experiment and control groups should be randomly selected, and the experiment should be designed so that everything about the 2 groups is alike except for the treatment or procedure. So your 2 groups you should try and randomly select from so that they're similar. The only thing that should change is the treatment or the procedure in both groups. So in example 5, we want to identify any flaws in the design of the experiment and then describe how they could be corrected. So our experiment is listed there for us. So a research company wants to conduct a study to determine whether a new fishing reel is more effective than the old one. The experimental procedure consists of using the new reel to catch fish in one lake and using the old reel to catch fish in another nearby lake that is randomly chosen. So your results, the company concludes that the new reel is twice as effective as the old reel. Where is the flaw in this procedure?
You're using 2 different lakes.
You're using 2 different lakes. Okay, so they're using the new reel in one lake and then the old reel in a different lake. So the flaw is that the fishing reels were used in 2 different lakes. Okay, then how do we fix it? How do we correct this procedure? If they're used in 2 different lakes, how would we correct it to make it not flawed?
Use them both in both lakes.
Use them in the same lake.
Or in both lakes, you can do that too.
Oops. That's an
That
R.
would be right too.
That's an R.
That's their, like
Use the reel in both lakes?
using both in one lake, then use both in the other lake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so picking out flaws. Does that part make sense? All right, then last part. When designing an experiment, clearly state the objective, identify the population, and determine the experimental and control groups and define the procedure. So this is similar to designing the survey, except now we're designing an experiment. Okay, so you're not coming up with survey questions. Instead, you're going to write out the sample procedure afterwards. So sample 6 says a company wants to determine whether wearing new tennis shoes improves jogging time. Okay, so letter A, we want to state the objective and then suggest the population. So what's the objective of our experiment here? So determine if the new tennis shoes improve jogging time. Okay? What would the population we want to target be? Runners or joggers, and then just potential buyers of the shoes. Okay, so this one was objective. This one was population. Just so you know which is which. Next part is to determine the experimental and control groups. So you have to have 2 different groups so that you can compare their results. So our experimental group, okay, what would our experimental group have to do in order to test this? Wear the new shoes. Okay? Okay, and then we have our control group. What are they going to do? So if these guys are wearing the new shoes that we're testing, what are these guys doing? Wearing a different pair. Okay. Okay, so the last part then, don't write super big because it's a lot, I'm sorry. But where you need to describe a sample procedure. So how are we going to run this experiment? So first, we want to select participants that probably jog on a regular basis, right? You're not going to pick somebody who sits in front of the TV and eats potato chips all day. Okay, so the company could select participants jog on a regular basis. And are close to the same age. They want to be close to the same age because you don't want somebody who's 80 and somebody who's 18 testing two different shoes, okay, if they're jogging. So you want to keep them roughly in that same age range. Okay, so next we need to divide our group into our experimental and control group. So we want to randomly divide the sample into two groups. The experimental group and the control group. Okay, then how are we going to, what are you doing? Oh,
Give them homework.
Here you go.
thanks.
You're welcome.
Not that one. That one.
Not that one. That one.
And you got one for yourself? Yes.
All right, so next we just want to state what they're going to do when they're split up into their two groups. So I have the company could record the jogging times of each group. Over a certain period of time. And then determine if there were larger improvements. I spelled that wrong. In the experimental group. Okay, so my sample procedure, you need to state kind of what we did in A and B. So you need to state what our objective is, who you're targeting, so what type of people you're going to have participate, and then you're splitting them up into your experimental and control groups, and then you want to state what they're actually going to do in those groups. So you're going to record the jogging times for each group, and then you want to see if there were improvements in your experimental group. If there were, then you can say those tennis shoes do improve jogging time. If there weren't improvements, then the shoes don't improve jogging time. Okay? Any questions?